I think there's a lot of people that are not very happy at the moment, possibly, and depending on their individual circumstances, whether it be health reasons, financial reasons, worldly reasons, things like that, right? And I think that we always tend to look outside of ourselves for things to make us feel happy when happiness really is an inside job. And it always comes back to that. And it's not so easy to navigate for a lot of people because we always feel that things that, we can gain from outside of ourselves, that it is going to be things that make us happy. And yeah, of course, those are things that contribute to our happiness. But I think in general, when you depend on somebody to make you happy or something to bring your happiness, you end up falling short in the long run. And, your happiness depends on these things that sometimes are taken away. And so in general, working on that happiness from within that's the statement of your podcast. So I think it's perfect.
Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome to a beautiful episode of Happiness from Within. I'm beyond ecstatic. We have a really special guest today. We have Dr. Sherri Greene. She combines science and holistic medicine and empathy gained from her own personal journey to help you shift into optimal health by boosting your immunity and healing your chronic pain and to help you live a better life. So Dr. Sherri, our first question that we have for you is, what does happiness from within mean to you?
That's a great question. I think it's a great question for everybody to consider because I think there's a lot of people that are not very happy at the moment, possibly, and depending on their individual circumstances, whether it be health reasons, financial reasons, worldly reasons, things like that, right? And I think that we always tend to look outside of ourselves for things to make us feel happy when happiness really is an inside job. And it always comes back to that. And it's not so easy to navigate for a lot of people because we always feel that things that, we can gain from outside of ourselves, that it is going to be things that make us happy. And yeah, of course, those are things that contribute to our happiness. But I think in general, when you depend on somebody to make you happy or something to bring your happiness, you end up falling short in the long run. And your happiness depends on these things that sometimes are taken away. And so in general, working on that happiness from within is that's the statement of your podcast. So I think it's perfect.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, there's never a right or wrong answer. I always get really amazing, beautiful answers from people that I interview. So thank you so much for sharing that. I would love for you to share. Today we're doing an amazing 30-minute interview, you guys, for those of you listening, watching. So what inspired you to be a doctor and how long have you been practicing? Like, I know we have a short period of time, but just in a few sentences, were you really sick as a child or when you were younger? Or
Yeah, I don't think, it's interesting. I never took it from that perspective before. I don't know that that's what inspired me to become a doctor. I think I was always really fascinated and interested in science, as a kid. I enjoyed science and math more than history and English. So if I had to pick, but I did have some chronic challenges when I was a kid. I got diagnosed with endometriosis pretty early on, and I had irritable bowel syndrome, had lots of problems trying to go to the bathroom. I had my share of, like, those were the two largest when I was a kid, and I had a lot of digestive issues. I always say, my mom always said there wasn't a day that I didn't have a stomach ache. I always had a stomach aches. So, and these are the things that you live with and you kind of just move through, as you move through. That's something that's not taking you down where you're functioning. And so at times with the endometriosis, I was barely functioning, and it got worse over the years. And I had a couple of surgeries, and it really continued to get worse along the way. But and there were other things that kind of happened for me along the way. Health-wise, I got diagnosed with Lyme disease, but I had, interestingly, I just knew I wanted to do something in medicine. I just always knew that that was my path. It wasn't sure which direction. And when I went conventionally and originally became a podiatrist and a surgeon, and but I knew pretty early on that it was very limiting, and I was very curious about why people, some people got better, some people didn't, with the things that you learned in school, everything that was in the textbooks. And I got really curious about mind body medicine and healing and what goes into the art of healing, and all of those questions started coming up. And that's when I started studying a lot of nutrition and functional medicine and functional nutrition and energy work and herbs and homeopathy. And I just kept going because it wasn't like I couldn't get enough, because I just knew that there was so much more, you know?
Oh, that's incredible. That's really, really great. Um, how long have you been practicing medicine, if you don't mind me asking?
Sure. I graduated from my residency in 1993.
Oh,
So I've been
wow.
practicing since 93, and it's been this like incarnation of who I have been and what I've brought into my practice and what I bring into my tool bag. And, you know, I'm teaching a course now called Ask the Docs with another practitioner, Dr. Satar, and it's a really interesting process, because just taking our years and my years of over 30 years of experience in medicine and alternative medicine, and teaching it and learning like all the pearls that you learn along the way and the mistakes that you made, and things like that. So there's so many incarnations of who you become, and when you learn something and you study something and then you embody it, and then it just becomes who you are, and then you're like incorporating it into your work with patients. So there's a lot. I think we're always, hopefully always growing and learning along the way. And I just, like I always say, I write a lot about staying curious. I think we need to stay curious big time right now. Just not to get locked down into one idea or belief system, that we are always willing to be open to something new coming in and some new information that we might not have known. So I think it's important for all practitioners to stay curious.
I really like what you said about being open, right?
Yeah,
Because sometimes we get so used to doing the same thing. I think that's
right.
a beautiful transition into talking about a little bit about medical medium. When did you start implementing the medical medium protocols into your own life and then start implementing it with your clients?
Or so I met Anthony in 2015. I had my first call with him in 2015.
Wow.
And
Okay.
it was introduced to me through a friend of mine in New York City. And she actually um, presented it like she was getting a session with him because a friend of hers had gifted her the session, and she was pretty sick with cancer. And so she said, I know you're into all this woo-woo type stuff. And could you check out this guy and look at his website? So that was my first, like, I remember going on his website,
Wow.
looking and being like, wow, this is fascinating, and I want to talk to him. And so, you know, I was struggling with what I was struggling with. And at the time there was a lottery. So I put my name on the list for a lottery. And that's really how it ended up happening for me to get in to have a chat with him. And then I got to meet him in person in Connecticut when he did that first live event there. And so that was really amazing. But yeah, so within the first 5 minutes of talking to him and me saying a little bit about what was going on, not even like the whole depth of it. And he just basically was like, you have a pretty severe case of shingles, and it's in your uterus and it's in your intestinal tract. So it was like, it's like that moment where you just, everything stops and you're just like, wait, what? And what are you talking about? And how is that possible? And I haven't had a rash. And so we went into like all the explanation, and we started having this great conversation about my practice of medicine. And I was asking him about patients, and I was like asking him all these questions, and it was just, it was like talking to somebody I knew for such a long time. So great. So it was a very powerful moment. And in that moment, I said, I want to help. Like, what can I do? How can I help? And so at the time he had a website that had practitioners on it for a period of time. And then that got split off because it needed to do it that way. But so I just got on the website at that time, and I just started bringing this information into my practice. And it was an interesting process of like, introducing people to medical medium information and grounding it in a way that, that they could receive, because yes, we don't have double-blind crossover studies at this time. Um, we just don't have that kind of information. And yet, when you open up these books and you read them, they're medical textbooks, and the wealth of information and the pearls of information that are in there are priceless. So one of the things that I always say is, if I didn't share this, it would be malpractice for me in my practice, because it's so important and it's so vital. And there's missing pieces in medicine that are in here that can really, as we know, as we see the testimonials and we see people getting better, that, are just, how do we turn away just because it's not coming in through a means that we all find comfortable, right?
Wow, that's really amazing. Well, I think that that was just part of your fortune. You're meant to speak with him, and now, you're helping so many people, like with your gifts that you already have as a doctor, but now also implementing medical mediums. I just think that's really amazing. That's really, really incredible.
Thank you. Yeah, it's an honor, and it definitely is. I feel like all of us who have found medical medium information feel like we're blessed in some way, right? To be able to have stumbled upon it somehow, or somebody has, or a book has fallen in front of us, or somebody has bought us a book, or somebody is like, or I meet so many people that just Google and they found it. And it's interesting, a lot of people have found it years and years ago, and then they didn't go anywhere with it, but somehow it comes back around. I find that interesting.
That's wonderful. So right now, do you work actually in a clinic, or do you take clients just via Zoom, or how does your practice work?
So I moved from New York City, where I had an in-person practice, and I was in person and virtual. And
Okay.
then I'm now in Florida.
Mhm.
I came down to Florida because my mom wasn't doing all that well. And so for now, I'm here. And so right now I just do virtual sessions unless something else unfolds here, or I go back to New York City, which could happen. But uh, I'm just doing virtual sessions with people around the world, the country, outside of the country. It's pretty phenomenal to get to meet people like from all over the place. Like I just did a session yesterday with someone from the husband and wife from the Philippines. Like it's just really amazing to just meet so many amazing people from so many variety of backgrounds, and how they came to this. Like that's my curiosity, to be like, so how did you find medical medium information to begin with? And so that's fun. It's really fun.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's incredible. Um, so a lot of majority of people that listen to Happiness from Within is a lot of women,
Mhm.
and high percentage. And I'm just wondering, any words of advice that you have for, anybody that's new or that's been on medical medium for a while, that um what can, obviously everybody's case is different because everybody has different health issues, but just anything that comes from your heart that you would like to share, as far as like, because I think that one thing that we all go through is losing faith, right? Because sometimes it can take years to heal from certain symptoms. But I just wanted to know, as far as like, spiritually, mentally, what kind of advice you could give for someone listening or watching this right now.
It's a great question, because I really answer this question probably 80% of the time during the day.
Yeah.
There's not, I think as a practitioner, you do have to be a cheerleader. Like you do have to keep people going when they're losing their faith. And it happens often. And it happened to me at the beginning. My system in my body did not turn around in a minute in any way, shape, or form. And so how do you cultivate faith? And I think it's, faith is so important. It really, really is. Trust and faith, and not losing it. And I remember certain times where I was having my own doubts, or because things weren't improving when it came to pain wise for me. Um, I always thought about everything else that I had already done. And I always reminded myself, like, you've tried everything, you did everything possible. And I do know, when Anthony says it's, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back as well. And then understanding that I really try to remind people a lot that when you're on this healing journey of healing so many symptoms, and most people come with 15 to 20 different symptoms, and maybe your biggest, loudest symptom isn't healing just yet, and
Yeah.
there's a frustration from that, but there's so much that's happening, I'd like to say subclinically, like below the surface, below your awareness, of before it actually manifests in that moment of like, oh my God, this is gone and this doesn't exist anymore. There's that period there where that unknown is. And so you can't really know what's happening. You don't feel great, but it's like it hasn't shifted yet. So it's really reminding them what they've healed already, that there are things healing below the surface that they can't see or feel just yet, and
Yeah.
that healing is never a straight path. Never, 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 never. It really is the ebb and flow. And we have few good days and we have a good weeks, and then something else happens. And so I think this is where community, and I always encourage people to go on, look at the testimonials, be part of a community somehow, go back, read the books, listen to the books if you can't read them, just immerse yourself in it somehow so that it can shore up your faith and hope, because it's really something that is so individual for each person, and they have to, it's like it is a spiritual journey, and you have to find this for yourself during the process.
Yeah.
But you need people in your life, like you need other humans to be able to talk to, right? And just have a conversation when things get really hard or really bad. I think that's pretty key, and I think it showed up so much at the LA event when we were all there, and there were so many people that gathered, and just being in that community. And I remember for me how it felt. There was never this time where there was an inner peace that happened, because you were finding all these like-minded souls. You weren't necessarily worrying about food and who was going to say anything to you about or judge you about any of it. And there was just this cohesiveness that happened for people from all over the world that was just very magical, and magical for me to see patients of mine that I never met in person, that I've only seen online, that I got to give a hug to. That was phenomenal, just phenomenal. But in general, faith is something that you have to cultivate, and you got to work at it. You got to work at it for sure.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful answer. Thank you for that. So
Sure.
one of the biggest questions that I have that I feel it's flowing through for someone that's listening or watching this right now, because I know we have a limited space. Is there anything you could share? So again, everybody's case is different, but there's a lot of us, women that really struggle with losing weight, right? And especially going into, late 30s and then going into the 40s. But I just want to ask if you could talk a little bit about that. It's like, it's not about going to the gym and getting in that protein, but just anything you'd like to share, because I know there's a lot of information, but again, just anything you'd like to share to give some hope or advice to someone that's struggling with weight, with weight gain. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Oh goodness, this is another one that you're hitting all the hot spots of like the topics that get spoken about every day in my practice, and I understand the weight issue being such a big one, and how women feel so uncomfortable and they just want to drop those pounds. When and I had one patient who was just like, "Don't keep telling me it's about my liver. I don't want to hear it's about the liver anymore." So I understand the frustration with that, and I understand what the body goes through, and it's interesting, the fear that happens, or the frustration when there's too much weight, and then the fear that happens when the people are losing too much weight and they can't put weight on. So
Yeah.
there's both sides of that story. I happened to be one at that time that when I first started, I couldn't keep weight on. It kept falling off, and I did not look well because I was really too thin.
Wow.
And so that's the type of viral load that you have. But then what happened is when things started to stabilize, and like now it's like, it's just interesting. Like there's no fear or worry about that anymore. It's anything, like you can still see how things shift. So things will always, always shift. And it really is, that's another thing of having patience with your body. in the largest way of like, you're not where you want to be. You're not happy. You don't understand, why is this weight not budging? Why is it not coming off? And like Anthony has always said, you can't push the liver more than it can be pushed at any one time. So yes, there's lots of things we can do for our liver. There's 369s. And even when people do all the right things, it's still not necessarily budging right away. And
Yeah.
that's when it becomes like, okay, so it's how much stress, how much toxic load, how much viral load do you have sitting in your liver? And I think people underestimate the amount of like stress that we all face every day,
Yeah.
and the amount of adrenaline that comes out of us and how our liver has to soak that up, right? And it doesn't mean that we can just poof, get rid of our stress, but I think it's how you learn how to manage it as much as you can while you're going through the process. But I wish there was a magic. I feel like if there's anybody that's given us magic tools for the, weight loss, it's really understanding that it does come down to the liver, and the two systems that take the longest to heal are the liver and the neurological system. So those two systems take a long time to budge. And so how do we get comfortable with being uncomfortable? I hate that, sometimes I'm like, it's such a cliche, but it's really true. How do we get comfortable with being uncomfortable? And there's some times in our lives where we're really incredibly uncomfortable, and that's where we have to like refocus, put our attention somewhere else, keep loving our livers as much as we can, and just know that they're working for us as hard as they possibly can. And it will happen. Like it will. I think it's like you have to, that's where that trust in that future, that it will shift for you too.
That's great. Thank you for that. I had somebody that wanted me to ask you a question. It's kind of a deep question, but why can't I just go and she asked, why can't I just go get lipo? Just have them suck it all out. Like why? And then like I can continue killing my liver, but they want me to ask you that question.
That's so funny. Well, it's kind of like the same thing by, why can't I just go take Ozempic and get most of the weight off, and then I can do what I need to do. It's like so we all want a quick fix, right? We're addicted to that quick fix type of thing. And I know that, I was overweight when I was in college, and I was one of those women, how they say the freshman 15 or the freshman 20. And it was like, I
Mhm.
remember going to college and being just get this free, like, oh my God, I'm gonna eat ice cream for dinner. Like it was just, it was this freedom of like doing whatever and eating whatever. And it was just an interesting process, but painful at the same time. So but I would say that you can do it. Sure. Can anybody go and go get liposuction and squeeze all that out? But what happens is that you still are dealing with the root cause, like with anything. Like we could do any kind of treatment, and we could do Botox, or we could do, any kind of medications, but we're still dealing with the root of it. So I do know the women who have done liposuction, and they end up in my office just as much as anybody else. So I think um, it's a really, really tough one when you want your weight to shift so badly and it's not. And that's when I think you have to like try to love your body exactly how it is in the moment, and honor honor it as much as you can, even though you're not exactly where you need or want to be. But if you do the liposuction, first of all, you're just going to put a lot of other problems, and you could have a lot of repercussions from doing something like that too, so that you might not realize.
That's such a great answer. I love, love, love what you said about honoring the body. That's so, so, so,
Yeah.
so, so key. So, so key.
I think we have to realize like how beautiful we are. Like I think we have so much stigmatism about what beauty looks like and what the body should look like and what a perfect body. And I think we've as women been messed up from that in a major way. And I
Mhm.
think it's really important to find that self-love somehow, or just even peace. If you can't get to self-love, you find some peace around it, and just kind of change your perspective on what you think you should look like or shouldn't look like, or what society deems beautiful or not, because we all know there's incredible beautiful women of all sizes and shapes, right?
Exactly. Exactly. No, that was just I felt like a glow in my heart, and I feel other people are going to feel the same. That was just such a beautiful answer that you gave, right? Because on some level, like you said, and it's so true, when somebody's dealing with chronic illness, they're dealing with 15 plus symptoms. It's not just,
Yeah.
it's not just the weight, this is like an accumulation of so many things, like that.
Remember, sometimes people who are thinner are suffer more because
Mhm.
they don't have that extra fat to like as protection for the vital organs. Because remember, sometimes the extra weight is actually protecting us.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that.
No, thank you for that. Yeah, no, it goes both ways.
Yeah.
So as we're coming to an end here, I just wanted to just my last question for you is just any last minute words you'd love to give that comes from your heart, any advice you'd like to give about, I don't know, maybe some supplements people can take, very basic, to survive in today's world. I know that's a very broad question, but yeah, I'm just gonna give you the floor. But yeah, that's my last question.
Okay. Well, first, I think one of the things that I'd like to say is that I'd like people who actually who follow medical medium information, and are maybe challenged by their family, friends, the world, and not feeling that they really fit in,
Mm,
and finding, I know it's really hard for people to go out to eat when they really want to go out to eat, and it's complicated, right? And
mm,
that's something that's entertainment as well. Um, I just remind myself of like, you all are so lucky to have this information. And it's such a gift to be able to heal our bodies in this way, and we are kind of ahead of the curve in so many ways that you might not even realize. Is like it's big, it's really big. Like I read so much. I spend a lot of time reading articles and what comes out in medicine, and the journals, and like there's so many things that are so lost and conflicted out there, and people are really confused. And now this is not the easiest of paths, and there's a lot of work behind it, and there's a lot of discipline behind it, but it really is the key to your longevity and wellness. And even if you think, well, I'm not that sick, what I've been seeing in my practice and what's I see in the world is that there are people that are either not so sick and they have a lot of symptoms and they think they don't need to do this, or it's too hard, or it's too difficult. And
mm,
you're fine until you're not fine. And that's been happening a lot with people. It's like all of a sudden somebody has type 2 diabetes, or somebody has cancer, or somebody has, like, it's just out of nowhere, and they're like dumbfounded. And I think, well, we have this information. It took a long time to build all that up. And if you start cleaning up on a regular basis and take care of yourself in this unique way, that there's a small section of the planet that's doing it's really going to lead you into so many good places in the end. And if I had to say, some baseline supplements, and it really depends on that person and what they're struggling with, but I do feel like everybody should be on zinc and B12 and some C. I think women can really do well with some ashwagandha. Iodine can be really, really helpful as well. If you wanted to pick, I mean, all the antivirals are so amazing, like the Golden Seal and the Lemon Balm and the Cat's Claw. But if you're trying to do something minimal, I would say, okay, you can have some lemon balm, some nettle leaf, some vitamin C, possibly curcumin, because it's so powerful anti-inflammatory. And then you can kind of, and magnesium, because we're all deficient in magnesium, and we can kind of play from there. Like if you're working on a pathogen, if you're working on a long-term EBV or shingles or cytomegalovirus or HHV6, and all those little bugs hang around, and we want to keep them in check, right? So that we can live our lives and we can get to that healthy place that allows us to go out and live our lives and not have to be, no one has to be perfect. And you're going to go out and do things you want to do, but you have a baseline to come back to.
that's wonderful. Just a really quick yes, no question. As we heal our livers, can we reverse gray hairs to have?
I think we can reverse gray hairs, yes. Not, there's some situations where that's a no, but
Yeah.
in general, I say yes, but it's also about the adrenals, right? So
Mm.
it's the liver, but it's a big piece of the adrenals are with grays. And I've seen people hair turn back for sure.
Wow, that's great. Well, Dr. Green, I really want to thank you for being a guest here on Happiness from Within. It's such a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. And yeah, maybe we can do this again in the future, maybe next year. There's space.
Sounds like sounds like a great plan. Thank you so much for having me, Janet. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful day. Talk to you soon.
You too.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.